10 Nights of Dream. Soseki Natsume. The first night. I had a dream like this. As I sat by the pillow with my arms crossed, a woman lying on her back quietly said, "I am going to die." Her long hair spread across the pillow, framing a soft, oval face. Beneath her pure white cheeks, a gentle flush of warmth lingered, and her lips, of course, were red. She did not look like someone who was about to die. Yet, in a calm voice, she clearly declared, "I am going to die." I was certain that she would. So, peering down at her, I asked, "Is that so? Are you really going to die?" "Yes, I am," she said, opening her eyes wide. Her large, moist eyes, framed by long lashes, were completely black inside. In the depths of those dark pupils, my own figure was reflected with perfect clarity. Gazing into those deep, translucent eyes, I thought to myself, can she really die like this? Leaning closer to her pillow, I softly asked, "Are you sure you won't die, will you? You'll be fine, won't you?" Still staring sleepily with her black eyes, she replied in the same calm voice, "But I am going to die. There is nothing to be done." I asked earnestly, "Can you see my face?" She smiled slightly and said, "See it. Look, you're right there, reflected in my eyes." I silently pulled my face away from the pillow, crossing my arms again. Is she really going to die? I wondered. After a while, she spoke again. "When I die, please bury me. Dig the grave with a large pearl shell, and place a fragment of a falling star from the heavens as my grave marker. Then, wait beside my grave. I will come back to see you." "When will you come?" I asked. "The sun will rise, and then it will set. Then it will rise again, and again it will set. As the red sun falls from east to west, will you be able to wait?" I silently nodded. Then, in a voice slightly raised, she said with conviction, "Wait for 100 years. Sit by my grave and wait for 100 years. I will come back to see you." I simply replied that I would wait. At that moment, my reflection, which had been so vivid in her black pupils, suddenly blurred. Like a calm surface of water disturbed by a ripple, it began to dissolve. Her eyes slowly closed with a soft flutter. A single tear slipped from between her long lashes and rolled down her cheek. She was already gone. I then descended into the garden and began digging a hole with the pearl shell. It was a large shell, smooth along its edges yet sharp. Each time I scooped up the earth, the moonlight caught the underside of the shell, making it glisten. The damp soil carried its own scent. Before long, the hole was dug. I placed the woman inside and gently covered her with the soft earth. Each time I scattered the soil, the moonlight gleamed on the back of the pearl shell. Then, I picked up a fallen fragment of a star and lightly placed it atop the soil. The fragment was round. I thought that, after falling from the vast sky for so long, its edges must have worn away, becoming smooth. As I lifted it and placed it on the ground, I felt a faint warmth spread through my chest and hands. I sat down on the moss. So, I will wait here for 100 years, I thought, crossing my arms as I gazed at the round gravestone. As the woman had said, the sun rose in the east. It was a great crimson sun. And just as she had foretold, before long, it sank into the west, sinking, still red. 1, I counted. After a while, another deep red sun sluggishly climbed the sky, then silently sank once more. 2, I counted again. I continued counting in this manner, 1, 2, until I lost track of how many red suns I had seen. No matter how much I counted, no matter how much I tried to keep track, countless crimson suns passed above my head. And yet, 100 years had still not come. At last, as I stared at the moss-covered round stone, a thought crossed my mind. Had she deceived me? Just then, from beneath the stone, A slender green stem emerged, stretching diagonally toward me. Before my eyes, it grew taller until it reached the level of my chest, where it finally stopped. At its tip, a single bud, its slender neck slightly tilted, slowly began to bloom, its petals unfolding with gentle grace. A pure white lily. Its scent pierced through me, sharp as a blade. From the distant heavens, a single dewdrop fell, landing upon the flower. The lily trembled under its own weight, swaying unsteadily. I leaned forward and pressed my lips to the cool, dew-laden petals. As I drew back, I instinctively lifted my gaze to the far sky. There, a lone star of dawn flickered in the distance. So the 100 years had already come, I realized for the first time. The second night, I had a dream like this. As I stepped back from the abbot's chamber and made my way down the corridor to my room, I saw the faint glow of the lantern flickering inside. Kneeling on one knee atop the cushion, I reached out to adjust the wick. Just then, a clove-shaped incense bud, delicate as a flower, dropped onto the vermilion lacquered stand with a soft pat. At that instant, the room brightened. The paintings on the sliding doors were by Buson. He had depicted black willows in varying shades of darkness and lights, creating a sense of depth and distance. A lone, forlorn fisherman walked along the embankment, tilting his straw hat against the cold wind. On the alcove hung a scroll of Monju, the bodhisattva of wisdom, rising from the sea. In the dim part of the room, the lingering scent of half-burnt incense still clung to the air. The temple was vast and eerily silent. There was no sign of life. As I lay on my back, the round shadow cast by the ceiling lantern seemed to come alive before my eyes. Still kneeling, I lifted the cushion with my left hand and slid my right hand underneath. There it is, just as I expected. A sense of relief washed over me. Restoring the cushion to its original position, I sank down firmly onto it. You are a samurai. A samurai should have no trouble attaining enlightenment, the abbot had said. And yet, if you still cannot grasp it, perhaps you are no samurai at all, he added. You are nothing more than human refuse. Then he laughed and said, Ah, you're angry now, aren't you? If you're so frustrated, bring me proof of your enlightenment. With that, he turned away. Unforgivable. Before the temple clock in the adjacent hall strikes the next hour, I will attain enlightenment, without fail. Then I will enter the abbot's chamber again tonight, and I will trade his head for my awakening. If I fail to reach enlightenment, I cannot take his life. That means I must attain it. I am a samurai. If I cannot grasp it, I will take my own life. A samurai cannot live after suffering such disgrace. I will die cleanly. At that moment, without thinking, my hand slipped beneath the futon once more and pulled out the dagger in its vermilion scabbard. I gripped the hilt tightly and swept the red sheath away. The cold blade flashed all at once in the dim room. It felt as if something dreadful was slipping away from my grasp, retreating toward the tip of the blade, where all the murderous intent had gathered into a single, concentrated point. As I looked at the keen edge, compressed to the size of a needle's head at its very tip, I was suddenly overcome with the urge to plunge it deep into myself. The blood in my body surged toward my right wrist, making the hilt in my grasp feel slick. My lips trembled. I sheathed the dagger and drew it close to my right side. Then I assumed the full lotus posture. Giorgio once said, Mu. What is Mu? Damn that wretched monk. I clenched my molars so hard the hot breath rushed out through my nose. The veins at my temples throbbed with pain. I forced my eyes open twice as wide as usual. I could see the hanging scroll. I could see the lantern. I could see the tatami. I could see the abbot's bald, kettle-like head as if it were right before me. I could even hear the sound of his scornful laughter, jaws wide like a crocodile. Unforgivable. I must sever that kettle-like head from his shoulders. I will attain enlightenment. I repeated silently, pressing my tongue against the roof of my mouth. Yet, even as I chanted moo, the scent of incense still lingered in the air. Damn it! Mere incense. I suddenly clenched my fist and struck myself in the head, again and again, as hard as I could. Then I ground my teeth together furiously. Sweat poured from both armpits. My back stiffened like an iron rod. A sharp pain shot through my kneecaps, but I thought, what does it matter if my knees break? Still, it hurt. It was agony. Mu refused to manifest. Every time it seemed on the verge of emerging, the pain flared up again. Fury overtook me. I felt utterly humiliated. Tears streamed down my face. I wanted to throw myself against a great boulder and shatter my bones and flesh to pieces. Yet I endured it. I sat in silence, bearing an unbearable torment that swelled in my chest, pressing against every muscle in my body, as if it were trying to burst forth through my pores. Yet every exit was sealed. It was the ultimate agony, with no escape. And then, my mind began to slip. The lantern, Buzen's painting, the tatami, the staggered shelves, everything wavered between existence and non-existence, between being and nothingness. And yet, Mu did not reveal itself. It felt as though I had simply been sitting there, lost in confusion. Then, suddenly, the clock in the adjacent room rang out. My heart leapt. Immediately, my right hand reached for the dagger. The clock struck for the second time. The third night. I had a dream like this. I was carrying a 6-year-old child on my back. It was undoubtedly my own child. And yet, strangely, at some point, the child had gone blind and had become a shaved head. When did you lose your sight? I asked. Oh, a long time ago, the child replied. The voice was unmistakably that of a child, yet the tone and manner of speech were entirely those of an adult, one speaking as my equal. On either side of me stretched lush green rice fields. The path was narrow. From time to time, the shadow of a heron flitted across the darkness. We've reached the rice fields, the child said from my back. How do you know? I asked, tilting my head slightly to glance backward. Because the herons are crying, the child replied. That very moment, 2 distinct cries of a heron echoed through the air. Though this was my own child, a shiver ran through me. If I keep carrying something like this, where will it take me? I wondered. I looked ahead, searching for a place where I might abandon it. In the distance, shrouded in darkness, I saw a great forest. That will do, I thought. Just as the thought crossed my mind, a soft chuckle came from my back. What are you laughing at? I asked. The child did not answer. Instead asked, Father, am I heavy? No, not at all, I replied. You will find me heavy soon enough, the child said. I said nothing and continued walking, keeping my eyes fixed on the forest. The path through the rice fields twisted unpredictably, preventing me from reaching my destination as easily as I had hoped. After some time, the road split into 2. I stopped at the fork, pausing to catch my breath. There should be a stone marker here, the child said. Sure enough, an 8-inch square stone stood about waist high. On its surface, in bright red characters, it read, Left, Hikubo, right, Hotahara. Though the night was dark, the red letters stood out vividly. They were the color of a newt's belly. Left is the better way, the child commanded. I looked to the left. The same forest loomed before us, its shadowy mass stretching from the high sky, casting darkness over our heads. I hesitated. Don't hold back, the child said again. Having no choice, I stepped toward the forest. As I walked down the narrow path, drawing closer to the woods, I thought to myself, for a blind child, he seems to know everything. Then, from my back, he murmured, being blind is such an inconvenience. That's why I'm carrying you, isn't it? I appreciate it, but still, being treated like a fool is unbearable. Even my own father mocks me. Something about this unsettled me. I quickened my pace, eager to reach the forest and abandon him. We're almost there, the child said. It was on a night just like this. What was? I asked, my voice tense. What was? You already know, don't you? The child replied, his tone mocking. And strangely, I did feel as if I knew. Yet I couldn't grasp it fully. I only felt that something like this had indeed happened before, and that if I kept walking a little farther, it would all become clear. But that realization terrified me. I had to get rid of him before I remembered. Before it was too late. The rain had been falling for some time. The road grew darker. I was barely aware of my surroundings anymore. All I knew was the weight on my back, the small child clinging to me, his presence like a mirror, illuminating every detail of my past, present, and future without a single omission. And yet, he was my child, and he was blind. I could bear it no longer. This is the place, right there, at the base of that cedar tree. His voice rang clear through the rain. I stopped. Somehow, I had already entered the forest. A short distance ahead, a black mass loomed, a cedar tree, just as he had said. Father, this is the place, isn't it? Yes, it is, I answered without thinking. It was the 5th year of Bunker, the year of the dragon, wasn't it? Yes, it did feel like the 5th year of Bunker, the year of the dragon. It was exactly 100 years ago that you killed me right here. The moment I heard those words, a realization struck me like lightning. 100 years ago, on a night just like this, in the 5th year of Bunker, the year of the dragon, I had killed a blind man at the base of this cedar tree. I was a murderer. As that truth came crashing down upon me, the child on my back suddenly became as heavy as a stone chisels statue. The 4th night. In the center of a wide dirt-floored room, a platform like a summer cooling bench was set up, with small stools arranged around it. The platform gleamed with a deep black sheen. In one corner, an old man sat alone before a square dining tray, drinking sake. His dish appeared to be simmered vegetables. The old man's face was deeply flushed from the sake. His skin was smooth and glossy, showing hardly any wrinkles. Only his long white beard revealed his age. Even as a child, I wondered, just how old was this man? Just then, a woman came in from the back, having drawn water from the bamboo spout into a wooden pail. Wiping her hands on her apron, she asked, "Grandfather, how old are you?" The old man swallowed his mouthful of simmered vegetables and, with a serene expression, replied, "I've forgotten." The woman tucked her freshly wiped hands into the folds of her narrow obi and stood to the side, gazing at the old man's face. The old man took a large cup, almost like a tea bowl, drank his sake in one gulp, then exhaled a long breath through his white beard. Then the woman asked, "Where is your home, grandfather?" The old man paused his breath midway and answered, "Deep within my navel." Still keeping her hands tucked into her obi, the woman continued, "And where are you going?" The old man once again took a large gulp of hot sake, exhaled just as before, and said, "That way." "Straight ahead?" the woman asked. Just then, the old man's breath, flowing like a gust of wind, passed through the shoji, swept beneath the willow tree, and drifted straight toward the riverbank. The old man stepped outside. I followed after him. A small gourd flask dangled from his waist, and a square box hung from his shoulder, tucked under his arm. He wore pale blue leggings and a sleeveless jacket of the same color. Only his tubby socks were yellow, appearing to be made of leather. The old man walked straight to the willow tree. Beneath it, 3 or 4 children had gathered. Smiling, he pulled a pale blue tanagri cloth from his waist. He twisted it tightly, as though weaving a sacred rope, and placed it in the center of the ground. Then he drew a large circular ring around it. Finally, he opened the box hanging from his shoulder and took out a brass flute, the kind street candy vendors use. Soon, that tenugi will turn into a snake. Watch closely, he repeated. The children fixed their eyes on the cloth. I too stared intently. Watch closely, Are you ready? The old man said as he began playing the flute, circling around the ring. I kept my eyes fixed on the tenugi, but it did not move at all. The old man played his flute, circling the ring over and over again, stepping lightly, creeping forward as if sneaking up on the cloth, as if showing it reverence. It was eerie, and yet strangely fascinating. At last, he stopped playing. He opened the mouth of his box, pinched the end of the tenugi, and swiftly dropped it inside. Once it's in here, it will turn into a snake. I'll show you soon, he said as he started walking straight ahead. Passing under the willow tree, he strode down the narrow path leading downward. I wanted to see the snake, so I followed him as far as the path would go. From time to time, he would say, "Any moment now," or "It's turning into a snake," as he walked. Eventually, he began singing, "Any moment now, it's turning into a snake. It surely will. The flute will play." Finally, we arrived at the riverbank. There was no bridge, no boat. I thought surely he'll stop here and show me the snake. But instead, the old man waded straight into the river. At first, the water reached only his knees, but soon it rose to his waist, then his chest. Then, as he continued forward, he disappeared beneath the water. Yet still, his voice carried over the rippling surface. The water deepens, the night falls, the path is straight. Then his beard vanished. His face, his head, his hood, everything disappeared beneath the river. I thought, when he reaches the far shore, he'll show me the snake. So I stood alone among the rustling reeds, waiting for him to emerge. I waited and waited, but the old man never came ashore. The fifth night. I had a dream like this. It seemed to be from a time long past, so ancient that it felt close to the age of the gods. I had fought in a war, and, having suffered an unfortunate defeat, I was captured alive and brought before the enemy general. People of that era were all tall. They all had long beards. They wore thick leather belts, from which they hung swords that resembled wooden staves. Their bows seemed to be made from raw wisteria vines, thick and unpolished, without lacquer or refinement, completely primitive in design. The enemy general gripped the center of his bow with his right hand and pressed it into the grass as he sat upon an object shaped like an overturned sake, jar. Looking at his face, I saw that his thick eyebrows joined together above his nose. Of course, razors did not exist in that time. Since I was a prisoner, I could not sit on a stool or seat. Instead, I sat cross-legged on the grass, my feet clad in large straw boots. The straw boots of this era were deep, reaching up to my knees when I stood. At the edges, the straw was left slightly unbraided, hanging down in tufts that swayed as I walked, an adornment of sorts. The general looked at me under the flickering light of the watchfire and asked, "Will you live or die?" This was customary in that time. Every prisoner was asked this question. Answering "I will live" signified surrender. Answering "I will die" meant one refused to submit. I answered with a single word: die. The general tossed his bow aside onto the grass. Then, with a swift motion, he began to draw the sword hanging from his waist. At that moment, the wind stirred the watchfire, sending flames flickering sideways, illuminating the glint of the unsheathed blade. I raised my right hand, fingers spread open like a maple leaf, palm facing the general, lifting it up before my eyes. It was the universal gesture for wait. The general clicked his sword back into its sheath. Even in those times, there was love. Before I died, I wished to see the woman I loved one last time. The general agreed to wait until the rooster crowed. If she did not arrive before then, I would die without seeing her. The general remained seated, gazing into the watchfire. I, too, sat cross-legged in my great straw boots, waiting for the woman. The night deepened. From time to time, the firewood crumbled, and each collapse sent flames tumbling wildly toward the general. Beneath his thick black eyebrows, his eyes glinted sharply. Someone approached and tossed a bundle of fresh branches into the fire. Soon, the flames crackled, splitting the darkness with their bold, defiant sound. At that moment, the woman untied the white horse tethered beneath the oak tree. She ran her hand along its mane 3 times, then, with a graceful leap, mounted its tall back. The horse had neither saddle nor stirrups. It was bare. Pressing her long, white legs against its broad belly, she spurred it forward. The flames from the watchfire flickered against the distant sky, casting a faint glow. The horse charged toward this glimmer of light, cutting through the darkness. From its nostrils, twin columns of fire-like breath shot into the air. Still, the woman urged it on, kicking its sides relentlessly. The sound of its hooves echoed as if striking the void itself. Her long hair streamed behind her, a banner trailing through the night. Yet she had not reached the firelight's edge. Then, from the pitch-black roadside, a rooster crowed. The woman's body flinched mid-air. She yanked back on the reins with all her strength. The horse reared, its front hooves slamming into the hard rock with a sharp, piercing crack. The rooster crowed once more. The woman gasped. Her grip loosened. The reins slackened. The horse's knees buckled. Together, they pitched forward, straight ahead, straight down. Beneath the rock lay a deep, dark abyss. The imprint of the horse's hooves remains upon that rock to this day, and the one who mimicked the rooster's cry, that was a monojaku. So long as the mark of those hooves remains carved into the stone, a monojaku is my sworn enemy. The Sixth Night. It was rumored that Unkei was carving the Nyo guardians at the gate of Gokokuji Temple. Curious, I decided to take a walk and see for myself. By the time I arrived, a crowd had already gathered ahead of me, eagerly exchanging opinions. About 5 or 6 ken before the temple gate stood a massive red pine. Its trunk slanted diagonally, partially obscuring the roof tiles of the gate as it stretched far into the distant blue sky. The contrast between the deep green of the pine and the vermilion of the gate created a striking harmony. Moreover, the positioning of the tree was perfect. It leaned at just the right angle so as not to obstruct the left edge of the gate, its branches widening as they ascended, extending out to the very eaves of the roof. There was something distinctly ancient about the scene, almost as if it belonged to the Kamakura period. Yet, the people standing there, watching, were all from the Meiji era, just like myself. Among them, rickshaw pullers made up the majority. They were likely loitering out of boredom while waiting for fares. "That's a huge thing," someone remarked. "Carving that must be far more work than making a person," another added. Then one man mused aloud. "So that's a Nyo, huh? They're still carving those these days. Is that so? Well, I always thought all the Nyo statues were ancient ones." "He looks unbelievably strong. They say nothing compares to the strength of a Nyo. Since ancient times, people have said that no one was stronger than the Nyo, not even Yamato Takeru." The man who spoke had his kimono hiked up at the waist and wore no hat. He seemed to be an uneducated fellow. Unkei, however, paid no attention whatsoever to the chatter of the onlookers. He continued working, steadily moving his chisel and mallet, without so much as a glance in our direction. Standing high up on the scaffolding, he was completely absorbed in carving the face of the Nyo. He wore a small, cap-like eboshi on his head and a loose robe, perhaps a some, with its long sleeves tied back behind him. His appearance was strikingly antiquated, entirely out of place among the noisy spectators. I couldn't help but wonder, how is Unkei still alive in this day and age? It was an utterly baffling thought. And yet there he was. Still, Unkei himself seemed utterly unfazed by the strangeness of the situation. He remained immersed in his work, carving with unwavering focus. A young man standing nearby, gazing up at him, suddenly turned to me and said, "That is Unkei, without a doubt. He has no regard for us. He carries himself as if only he and the Nio exist in the world. True hero standing alone. How magnificent." I found his remark intriguing. Glancing over at him, I saw that he immediately followed up with, "Just look at how he wields his chisel and mallet. He has attained the highest realm of mastery." At that moment, Unkei made a single horizontal cut, carving out the thick brow of the Nio. Then, without hesitation, he turned the chisel vertically and struck down forcefully with his mallet. The tough wood yielded instantly, thick shavings flying through the air in response to the impact. Before we knew it, the sharply flared nostrils of the Nio had emerged from the block. His chiseling was bold, utterly uninhibited, and there was not even a trace of doubt in his movements. How can he use the chisel so carelessly, yet carve exactly the eyebrows and nose he envisions? I was so impressed that I muttered to myself. The young man beside me responded, "No, he's not carving eyebrows or noses with his chisel. He's merely uncovering the ones already buried within the wood. His chisel and mallet only bring them to the surface, just like digging a stone out of the earth. That's why he never makes a mistake." It was at that moment that I first understood. So that's what sculpture is. If that were true, then anyone should be able to do it. Suddenly, I was seized by the desire to carve a Nio myself. I abandoned my place among the spectators and rushed home. From my toolbox, I took out a chisel and a hammer. Stepping into the yard, I found a pile of logs, oak trees felled in the last storm, cut into pieces by a sawyer for firewood. I picked the largest log and began carving with great enthusiasm. But, unfortunately, no Nio appeared. I tried the next log, again with no luck. The third log was no different. One by one, I went through every piece of wood in the pile, carving into each, searching. But not a single one contained a Nio. At last, I understood. In Meiji-era wood, no Nio is buried. And with that, I also realized why Unkei had continued to live until this very day. The seventh night. I was aboard a great ship. Day and night, without a moment's pause, the ship plowed through the waves, spewing black smoke as it advanced. The sound was deafening, but where it was headed, I had no idea. From beneath the waves, a sun like a burning fire iron would rise. It would climb steadily until it hung directly above the towering mast. Then, before I knew it, it had overtaken the ship and gone ahead. Eventually, with a sudden sizzle, it would sink back into the depths of the waves. Each time it vanished, the distant blue sea would boil into a deep so red. And each time, the ship roared forward, chasing after it with tremendous force. Yet, it never caught up. One day, I caught hold of one of the sailors and asked, "Is this ship heading west?" The sailor gave me a puzzled look and stared at me for a moment. Then he asked, "Why do you ask?" "Because it seems as though we're chasing the setting sun." The sailor let out a hearty laugh. Then, without answering, he walked off. From somewhere, voices rose in song. "Does the setting sun's end lie in the east? Is that the truth? Does the rising sun's home lie in the west? Is that the truth? We drift upon the waves, our pillow the helm. Drift on, drift on." I made my way to the bow. There, a group of sailors had gathered, pulling thick ropes, hauling in the great sail. I felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness. There was no telling when we would reach land, nor did I know where we were headed. All I knew was that the ship continued to cut through the waves, spewing black smoke as it went. The sea stretched endlessly in every direction, an expanse of deep blue, boundless and vast. At times, it shimmered with shades of purple. Yet, around the moving ship, the water was always foaming, a constant ring of pure white. I felt utterly alone. Rather than remain on this ship, I thought, perhaps it would be better to throw myself overboard and end it all. The ship was filled with passengers. Most of them seemed to be foreigners, but they had all sorts of different faces. One day, when the sky grew dark and the ship began to sway, I saw a woman leaning against the railing, weeping uncontrollably. The handkerchief she used to wipe her tears was stark white, but her dress was patterned like sarasa, a richly dyed fabric. Seeing her, I realized, I am not the only one who is sad. One night, as I stood alone on the deck, gazing at the stars, a foreigner approached me. He asked if I knew astronomy. What use was astronomy to me? I was so lost in despair that I was even considering death. I had no need for such knowledge. I remained silent. The man then began telling me about the 7 stars at the peak of Taurus, and how the stars, the sea, everything, had been created by God. Finally, he asked me if I believed in God. I looked up at the sky and said nothing. One day, I entered the saloon. A young woman in extravagant clothing sat with her back to me, playing the piano. Beside her stood a tall, dignified man, singing a hymn. His mouth seemed unusually large as he sang. But neither of them paid the slightest attention to anything beyond themselves. It was as if they had forgotten they were even on a ship. I felt even more empty. At last, I made up my mind. I would die. So, one night, when no one was around, I resolved to take the plunge and threw myself into the sea. But, the instant my feet left the deck, severing my connection to the ship, a sudden, overwhelming fear of death seized me. From the depths of my soul, I thought I shouldn't have done this. But it was too late. Whether I liked it or not, I was already falling toward the sea. The ship must have been built quite high, for though my body had left it, my feet had yet to touch the water. Yet, with nothing to grasp onto, I drew closer and closer to the waves. No matter how I curled up my legs, I could not stop my descent. The water beneath me was black. Meanwhile, the ship, as always, spewed its trail of black smoke and moved on, vanishing into the distance. For the first time, I realized, no matter where it was headed, I would have been better off staying on that ship. But that realization came too late. I could not take it back. With endless regret and unfathomable terror, I drifted downward, slowly sinking into the black waves. The 8th night. As I stepped over the threshold of the barber shop, 3 or 4 men in white garments turned to me at once and said, "Welcome." Standing in the middle of the room, I looked around. It was a square space. 2 walls had windows, while the other 2 had mirrors hanging on them. I counted 6 mirrors in total. I approached one of them and sat down. The chair was exceptionally well cushioned. When I settled into it, there was a soft plop. My reflection in the mirror was clear and sharp. Behind my face, I could see the window. Beyond that, at an angle, I saw the counter's wooden lattice. There was no one inside. Through the window, I could see the upper halves of passers-by on the street. Shutar walked by, escorting a woman. At some point, he had acquired a Panama hat and was now wearing it with an air of satisfaction. The woman, where had she come from? When had he found her? Both of them looked pleased with themselves. Just as I tried to get a better look at the woman's face, they passed out of sight. A tofu seller walked by, blowing his trumpet. His cheeks were puffed out as he pressed the instrument to his lips, swollen as if he had been stung by a bee. He continued down the street with his cheeks still bulging, which left me oddly unsettled. For some reason, I felt as if he would remain stung by that bee for the rest of his life. A geisha appeared. She hadn't finished applying her makeup. Her shimada hair was coming loose, giving her an untidy look. Her face was still heavy with sleep. Her complexion was alarmingly pale. She bowed and said something. "How do you do?" Or perhaps something else. But whoever she was speaking to refused to emerge from the mirror. Then, a tall man in a white garment stepped behind me. He held a pair of scissors and a comb, examining my head. I twisted my thin mustache and asked, "Well, do you think you can do something with it?" Without answering, the man lightly tapped my head with the amber-colored comb in his hand. "Well, not just my hair. What do you think? Do you think I can become something worthwhile?" I asked the man in white. He still said nothing, only continued snapping his scissors rhythmically. Determined to take in every detail reflected in the mirror, I kept my eyes wide open. But each time the scissors clicked, black strands of hair flew through the air, and soon, the sight unnerved me. I shut my eyes. Then, the man in white spoke. "Did you see the goldfish seller outside?" I said I hadn't. He said nothing more and continued snipping away. Suddenly, a loud voice cried out, "Watch out." Startled, I opened my eyes. Beneath the man's sleeve, I glimpsed the wheel of a bicycle. A rickshaw's shaft came into view. Then, before I could process it, the man in white firmly pressed both hands against my head, turning it sharply to the side. The bicycle and rickshaw disappeared completely. The scissors clicked on. Soon, the man moved to my side, trimming around my ears. Since the stray hairs no longer flew in front of me, I felt at ease and opened my eyes. "Owamochi, fresh mochi here." A voice rang out close by. A small wooden mallet struck against a mortar in rhythm as someone pounded rice cakes. I had only seen an owamochi vendor once when I was a child. I wanted to catch a glimpse of him now, but no matter how I looked, the mirror did not reveal him. Only the sound of the pounding echoed in the air. I strained my sight, peering toward the corner of the mirror. That was when I noticed. Inside the wooden lattice counter, a woman had appeared. She must have arrived without me noticing. She was a tall woman with dark skin and thick eyebrows. Her hair was styled in an ikogeshi knot, and she wore a plain silk kimono with a black satin collar. Sitting with one knee raised, she was counting banknotes. 10-yen bills, it seemed. Her long lashes were lowered, and her thin lips pressed together as she counted with relentless speed. Yet, no matter how long she counted, the number of bills never seemed to change. There were only about 100 on her lap, but no matter how long she kept counting, there were always just 100. I stared in a daze at the woman's face and the endless 10-yen bills. Then, near my ear, the man in white suddenly called out, "Shall I wash your hair?" It was a perfect moment. I stood up from the chair immediately and turned toward the counter, but there was nothing there. No woman. No banknotes. Nothing. After paying my fee, I stepped outside. To the left of the entrance, 5 shallow tubs were lined up. Inside them swam red goldfish, variegated goldfish, thin goldfish, fat goldfish, many, many goldfish. Behind them sat the goldfish seller. He rested his chin in his hand, gazing at his fish. He paid no attention to the bustle of the street around him. For a while, I stood there watching him, but throughout that time, the goldfish seller never moved an inch. The ninth night. The world had begun to stir with unease. It felt as though war could break out any moment. Like wild, unsaddled horses, burned out of their stables, rampaging day and night around the house, pursued by a swarm of foot soldiers, relentlessly chasing them. And yet, within the house itself, all was eerily still. Inside there was a young mother and her 3-year-old child. The father had gone somewhere. He had left in the dead of night when the moon was absent from the sky. Sitting on the floor, he had strapped on straw sandals and pulled a black hood over his head before slipping out through the back entrance. The dim glow of the Bombori lantern in the mother's hands cast a long, narrow beam into the dark night, illuminating an old cypress tree just beyond the hedge. The father never returned. Every day, the mother would ask her child, "Where is your father?" At first, the child said nothing, but after some time, the child began to answer, "Over there." When the mother asked, "When will he come back?" the child would still reply, "Over there," and laugh. The mother would smile too and repeatedly tell the child, "He will return soon." But the only word the child ever remembered was soon. Sometimes, when asked, "Where is your father?" the child would simply reply, "Soon." When night fell and all was quiet, the mother would tighten her sash, slip a dagger with a sharkskin scabbard into her obi, and strap her child to her back with a thin cord before quietly stepping out through the side gate. She always wore straw sandals. The child, listening to the rhythmic sound of her footsteps, would sometimes drift to sleep on her back. Heading west through the residential district lined with earthen walls, she descended the long, sloping road. At the bottom stood a great ginkgo tree. Turning right at this landmark, she walked another cho or so until she reached a stone torii gate. One side of the path was rice fields, the other dense with wild kumasasa bamboo. Passing under the torii, she entered a grove of towering shugi cedars. 20 ken ahead, the path of stone slabs led to the foot of an old shrine steps. By day, a large Suzu bell rope hung above the Seizenbako offering box, which was worn smooth and grey from years of use. Beside the bell, a wooden plaque bore the inscription Hachiman Shrine. The kanji for Hachi was stylized to resemble 2 doves facing each other, a peculiar yet charming design. Other plaques adorned the shrine as well. Most bore the names of samurai who had pierced golden targets in archery competitions. Some, on rare occasions, housed dedicated tachi swords. Passing under the torii, the hoot of an owl could always be heard from the treetops. Meanwhile, the damp sound of Hayameshizuri sandals, soft and wet, echoed through the quiet night. The footsteps would stop before the shrine. The mother would first ring the great bell, then crouch down and clap her hands in prayer. At that moment, the owl would often fall silent. Then she would pray with unwavering devotion for her husband's safety. In her heart, she believed that since her husband was a samurai, if she made her desperate plea to Hachiman, the god of war, there was no way her prayers would go unanswered. Sometimes, the ringing of the bell would wake the child on her back. Finding themselves surrounded by pitch darkness, they would suddenly burst into tears. Still whispering her prayers, the mother would gently rock her back, trying to soothe her. At times, this would quiet the crying. At other times, the sobs would grow louder. Yet, no matter what, she would not rise from her prayers. Once she had finished praying for her husband's well-being, she would untie the thin cord securing the child to her back, bringing them forward in her arms. She would climb the steps to the shrine, press her cheek tightly against the child's, and whisper, "Be a good child and wait for just a little while." Then she would take the same cord and bind the child, fastening the other end securely to the shrine's railing. After that, she would descend the steps once more and begin her ritual, walking back and forth along the Shaikishi stone pavement, completing her Oyakada pilgrimage. If the child, bound to the shrine, quietly crawled about the veranda within the limits of the cord, it was a peaceful night for the mother. But if the child began to cry, wailing loudly, the mother's heart would race. Her footsteps would quicken. Her breath would grow ragged. If the crying became unbearable, she would abandon her pilgrimage midway, climb the shrine steps, soothe the child with gentle words, then return to complete her rounds once more. For countless nights, the mother repeated this, tormenting herself, sacrificing sleep, praying desperately for her husband's safe return. Yet, long ago, the husband she prayed for had already been killed, slain by wandering ronin. I heard this tragic tale from my mother in a dream. The 10th night. On the 7th night, after Shoto had been taken away by a woman, he suddenly returned, wandering back as if nothing had happened. But soon after, he was struck by a fever and collapsed into bed. It was Ken-san who came to inform me. Shoto was the most handsome man in the neighborhood, upright, honest, and good-natured. However, he had one particular habit. Every evening, he would put on his beloved Panama hat, stroll to the front of the fruit shop, sit on the bench, and quietly admire the faces of the women passing by. He would sit there for hours, utterly enthralled. That was his only true indulgence. If no women happened to pass by, he would gaze instead at the fruit on display. The fruit shop had a variety of offerings: peaches, apples, loquats, bananas, all neatly arranged in baskets, ready to be given as gifts. Shoto would often remark on how beautifully arranged they were. He once even claimed, "If I ever go into business, I'll run a fruit shop. Nothing beats it." And yet, he never made any move to work. He simply lounged around in his Panama hat, aimlessly enjoying his time. Sometimes, he would inspect the Natsume oranges, commenting on their color as if judging a fine piece of art. However, he never actually bought any fruit, nor did he ever eat it for free. He simply admired it. One evening, a woman suddenly appeared in front of the shop. She was elegantly dressed, suggesting she came from a wealthy family. The color of her kimono immediately captivated Shotaro. And more than that, he was utterly taken by her face. Without hesitation, he removed his Panama hat, bowed politely, and greeted her with utmost respect. The woman pointed at the largest basket of fruit and said, "I'll take this one, please." Shotaro promptly picked up the basket and handed it to her. She lifted it slightly and remarked, "My, this is quite heavy." Being a carefree and good-natured man, Shotaro, without a second thought, offered, "Allow me to carry it to your home." With that, he left the fruit shop, walking alongside the woman, and he never came back. Even for someone as carefree as Shotaro, this was unusual. His relatives and friends began to worry. This isn't normal. Something must have happened to him. They searched and speculated, but there was no sign of him. Then, on the 7th night, just like that, Shotaro strolled back into town. Naturally, a crowd gathered around him at once. "Sho-san, where have you been?" they demanded. Shotaro, looking utterly unfazed, simply replied, "I took the streetcar into the mountains." It must have been an exceptionally long streetcar ride. According to Shotaro, as soon as he stepped off the train, he found himself in an open field. It was an enormous plain, covered in endless stretches of blue-green grass. He walked across the grass with the woman until, suddenly, they arrived at the edge of a sheer cliff. That was when the woman turned to Shotaro and said, "Why don't you jump?" He peered over the edge, but while he could see the cliff's sheer face, he could not see the bottom. Removing his Panama hat once again, he politely refused multiple times. Then the woman said, "If you don't jump, the pigs will come and lick you. Is that what you want?" Shotaro absolutely hated pigs, just as much as he hated Kumo Uemon, but he still valued his life too much to leap into the abyss. So he remained where he was. Then, sure enough, a pig appeared, snorting as it approached him. With no other choice, he swung his thin Binoju walking cane and struck the pig's snout. The pig let out a goo and, without hesitation, tumbled backward over the cliff's edge. Relieved, Shotaro took a deep breath. But before he could relax, another pig appeared and pressed its large, wet nose against him. He had no choice but to raise his cane again. With another goo, the second pig also toppled into the abyss. Then, another pig came forward. At that moment, Shotaro suddenly realized something. Looking toward the far end of the grassy plain, he saw them, tens of thousands of pigs, maybe even more, marching toward him in a straight line. They snorted in unison, their noses aimed directly at him, as they trampled the grass in an unstoppable advance. Shotaro was genuinely terrified, but he had no choice. One by one, he struck the pigs on their snouts, sending them plummeting into the chasm. It was an eerie sight. The moment his cane touched their noses, each pig would instantly topple over and disappear into the abyss. Peering down, he saw an endless stream of pigs, tumbling upside down, vanishing into a bottomless void. The sheer number of them overwhelmed him. The thought that he alone had sent so many pigs to their doom sent shivers down his spine. Yet, the pigs continued to come. Like a dark storm cloud with legs, they pushed forward, parting the grass with their unstoppable advance. For 7 days and 6 nights, Shotaro desperately swung his cane, knocking pig after pig into the abyss. But eventually, his strength gave out, his hands weakened, turning as feeble as konnyaku jelly, and in the end, the pigs got to him. They licked him, and he collapsed at the edge of the cliff. At this point in the story, Ken-san turned to me and said, "That's why staring at women too much is a bad idea." I had to agree, but Ken-san also mentioned, "I really want that Panama hat of Shotaro's." Shotaro wasn't likely to survive. The Panama hat would surely belong to Ken-san soon.